Mask of a Diva, a Stan Kraychik mystery, Book 4, 1994. Author, Grant Michaels. Publisher, St. Martin's Press, New York. Author, Eric Aust. For all the divas, operatic and otherwise. Chapter 29. Next morning, I was having breakfast in the gazebo with Daphne. It seemed a long while since we had enjoyed the morning ocean together. Then I realized the last time I had been the morning Marcella Ostanana's body had been discovered. Daphne said, "I missed your good night last night." "I was in a state," I said apologetically. "A state?" "I think the Victorians called it hysteria." "Yes," said Daphne. "Fraud, too. Quite sexist, you know." "I know," I said, "but it's the only way to describe my behavior. There I was, calmly having a burger and a beer with Lieutenant Branco, friendly-like, and then, without warning, I had an uncontrollable urge to flee." Daphne said, "I think the moderns call it a panic attack." "But it was beyond anything mental and emotional," I said. "It was physical, and it was in my whole body." "Adrenaline is strong stuff," said Daphne. "But what caused it?" "Ah," she said knowingly. "That's quite another matter." At that moment, Parker appeared at the gazebo with the portable telephone. "For Mr. Kraychik," he said. "It was Branco. He told me to report to the Opera House immediately. He didn't even ask me how I was, which shouldn't have surprised me. Real men probably didn't do that either." I apologized to Daphne and left my breakfast unfinished. "I understand, dear," she said coolly. "Duty calls." The front of the Opera House was lined with police cruisers. When I pulled around to the back parking lot near the stage door, I found the area cordoned off. An ambulance was parked and awaiting its tenant. I identified myself at the stage door and was admitted inside. I found Lieutenant Branco downstairs in the wig room. On the floor was the body of Daniel Carafalio. Sticking up out of his chest was the jewel-encrusted handle of a stiletto. The knife appeared to be larger than life, like a theatrical prop, whose sinister aspect had to chill viewers far up in the second balcony. A pair of suede work gloves had been jammed into his mouth. They were disturbingly familiar. Branco saw me standing in the doorway. He came over to me and said quietly, "How do you feel this morning?" "It must have been that veggie burger." "I thought it might be something else," he said with a peculiar warmth in his eyes. Then he was all business again. "What about this?" he said, pointing to Daniel's body. "No love lost there either, right?" That one word, either, gave me pause. Either Daniel or whom? "I won't miss him," I said. "I suppose that's a sorry thing to say about any dead person." Branco grunted. "Have you seen those gloves before?" "I'm not sure," I lied. "Well, I have," said the cop. "I'd like you to go and do a little excavating before I talk to her." "You mean the stage manager?" Branco nodded. "That's right. I knew you'd seen those gloves before." "No, I just assumed." He interrupted me. "You've got your assignment. Now go do it." Branco returned to his manly duties. Just then one of his assistants called out, "Lieutenant," and ran up to him. "You might want to see this." He held up a sealed plastic bag. As Branco took the bag, I saw that it contained a pair of leather gauntlets. The assistant said, "We found them in the costume room." Branco studied the contents for a moment. "Looks like blood," he said. "That's what I thought," said the assistant eagerly. "Get it to the lab," said Branco, "and remind them to look inside, too." The assistant said, "I'm sure they will, sir." "Just remind them," snapped Branco. He turned back into the wig room, leaving the poor rookie to wonder why his zeal hadn't been appreciated. I followed Branco into the wig room. "There's something else you should know, Lieutenant." "What's that?" said Branco, his patience clearly spent. Regarding those gauntlets, yesterday I overheard Daniel mention something to Jonathan Byers about Spoleto, the opera festival in Italy. I guess so. He alluded that Byers had stolen something there as well. More hearsay, said Branco. But Daniel had also told me the other day that Spoleto is where Jonathan Byers and Rick Jensen first met each other. Branco ruminated a while on these tidbits, then said, I'll put a data search on it. He scribbled a note in his little black book. Then he looked up at me. Something else, he said. No. Then get to work. Yes, boss, I said, feigning a salute. Branco just turned away. I trotted upstairs to the backstage area to dispatch my mission with Rhonda Luca. I acted surprised to see her there. You're here, I said. We've got a tech rehearsal in an hour. Where the hell is everybody? Rhonda, the cops are all over the place downstairs. I know, I called them, she shrugged. Big deal. The wig man is dead. Is the world supposed to stop turning? He was murdered. I'm not surprised, she said. My big problem this morning, actually. I got two big problems. One, where is everybody? And two, where are my work gloves? The gray suede ones, I said. Yeah, Rhonda replied. You seen them? Don't look now, doll, but that body downstairs in the wig room? Yeah. I think your gloves are in his mouth. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, are you shitting me? No, they were sticking right out there like a big old leather tongue. Christ, I didn't even see them. All I seen was that knife stuck in his chest, and I ran like hell. It was like something on TV, you know. All I could think was, call the fucking cops. You did that right, at least. Yeah, well, now I need them damn gloves. I ought to just go and pull them out. Rhonda, you might want to reconsider. What? You think just because some asshole takes my gloves and shoves them down some guy's throat, the cops are going to say I'm guilty? That's not procedure, pal. That's bad writing. I agree, Rhonda, but like you said, this is like something on TV. Heedless of my words, she headed towards the stairway, then suddenly stopped and turned around. She looked back at me with a resigned sort of half-grin. You know, she said, maybe I don't need them gloves so bad right now. Good thinking, I said and walked over to her. But I wonder how they got in his mouth. Rhonda said, How do you think? Someone put them there. I eyed her suspiciously. Who might that be? She said, If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, you're full of shit. Then why are your gloves in Daniel's mouth? Rhonda said, Obviously, someone wants to frame me. Who? How should I know? Rhonda, no one knows better than you who it might be. Hey, what is this? 20 questions? Branco wants to know. Then let him ask me. I'd got her defenses up too high, even for me to scale them. Maybe Branco was right. Maybe I didn't have what it took to be a good investigator. Fine, then. Let him do his own questioning. There was still an hour until the 10 o'clock rehearsal. Under the circumstances, it should have been canceled, but since Jonathan Byers had continued rehearsing the same day Marcella Ostanada's body had been found, it was unlikely that he'd halt the schedule just because the wigmaster had been exterminated. So I went back downstairs. I figured I could stand around the stage door and note everyone's reactions as they arrived at the opera house and found yet another corpse in their midst. But there was nothing much to discover. The whole lot of them, the maestro, Carolyn Bowitz, April Kilkis, Hwang Young Cho, Jonathan Byers, Rick Jensen, the new tenor, they were all unfazed by Daniel Carafelio's death. If anything, they were all annoyed by the inconvenience of identifying themselves to the police and then explaining why they were there. The most important aspect of their lives at the moment was the day's rehearsal, and beyond that, the swift approach of opening night. Only 3 days away. The run-through that day was the official technical rehearsal. It was the full opera, done all the way through, including lights, blocking, set changes, special effects, props, and some costume changes, but everything was performed cue to cue rather than note by note. So rather than have, say, April Kilkus come on stage and sing one of Amelia's arias, during tech, April would get her cue to enter, then make the entrance and start the aria. But then the operatic clock would stop while all the hundreds of little operations of stagecraft that comprise that scene would be activated and run and rerun until every element was securely established. Lights and gels were adjusted, sight lines re-examined, props were placed and replaced, costume mock-ups applied, and then all was run again from the start of the cue. Then finally the operatic clock would start up again and race forward to the next cue, where the same thing would happen all over again. Tech rehearsal was like watching a film on a VCR by using the fast-forward button to locate a scene and then playing that scene in excruciating frame-by-frame slow motion to watch the molecular components of the movie and then zooming on to the next scene. You'd almost think it would take less time since very few notes were being sung, but tech always took longer than the full-length show because of the endless starting and stopping. Rafik once told me it's especially agonizing for the performers because it works against the natural momentum that comes from building a character on stage in the continuum of moment-to-moment growth. In fact, it's very common after tech for performers to be suddenly insecure about their roles. At one point, the costume designer approached me in a desperate panic and offered to rehire me at Daniel's salary if I would agree to make all the necessary adjustments to the wigs. Of course, I accepted, but on two conditions. The first was that they hire someone else for the rest of the run, since I had plans to be in Europe with hubby. The designer agreed to that one easily. The second condition was that I have some creative freedom with the styling. As I expected, he resisted on that point, then reconsidered his position, and then reluctantly agreed. And from that moment, every wig behaved perfectly under my expert hand. After rehearsal, Branco met me outside the stage door. "Is that offer of a drive still good?" he said. "Sure," I said. "You want to drive?" "I'll ride this time." I said, "I'm not exactly a hotshot driver." "In time," said Branco. We headed up along the ocean road, and Branco told me that the medical examiner had established Daniel Carafelio's time of death to be sometime between 5 and 6 o'clock the previous evening, right around the time when Branco and I were having veggie burgers. I said, "At least I have a perfect alibi. I was dining with a cop." "Except," said Branco, "you had that damn panic attack and ran out on me. I can't testify where you went after that." "Testify? Are my whereabouts in question?" "Probably not," said Branco. "What's more important right now are the lab reports." "More important than my alibi?" Branco continued. "The lab just called from Boston. As I'd suspected, the blood on those leather gauntlets is Marcella Ostinata's." "So you're assuming the killer wore the gauntlets when he slashed Marcella's throat?" Branco corrected me. "He or she," he said. "But yes, that's the way I see it. The lab also examined the inside of the gauntlets, and they came up with a fragment of hair in one of the fingers. I'm betting it came off the knuckle of the killer, or anyone else who had his or her hand in there at any time." "That's true," said Branco with an ambiguous nod. "But all I care about is whether it came from someone on my list." "Who's on that list?" "You know the cast as well as I do." He named the names I'd named before. I downshifted into a tight turn. The road wasn't banked, and I took it a bit too fast, causing the rubber to squeal. "Tires need air," I said breezily, but when I looked at Branco, his face was flat. I said, "Is the hair fragment a man's or a woman's?" "Hard to tell," said Branco. "It's just a small piece." "But you're hoping it's the killer's," I said. "If we get a match, it would make things real easy," replied Branco. "I'm still waiting for a DNA analysis, then I'll know whose it is, since the gauntlets had direct contact with the skin of the wearer." "Just like underwear," I said. Branco grunted. We approached another turn, this one on an incline. I saw Branco brace his foot against the floorboard. But this time I revved the engine high enough for a smooth downshift and then maneuvered the corner as though the Alpha was on rails. Branco made a tiny nod, then gazed out over the water as we climbed higher. I said, "What about the suede gloves? Was there anything in those?" "Too soon," said Branco, "but I haven't eliminated the stage manager as a suspect. She's one tough little cookie, certainly strong and agile enough to jump a man like Carafalio from behind and stab him through the front of his chest. But what would be her motive?" "I'll worry about that later," he said. "Right now, I just want some physical evidence to book someone." "That sounds a little reckless," Branco glared. "Sorry," I said. "What are you going to do next?" "What do you think? Get hair samples from everyone." "Is that an invasion of privacy?" "I've got search warrants." "Already?" "I have some clout," said the cop. I half expected Branco to grab my hand and pluck one of the coppery hairs from a finger knuckle, but he didn't. "What really concerns me," he said, "is that no one around that place has said, 'Too bad,' about that guy. Not even once. It was the same with the singer." "That's not surprising, Lieutenant. None of the victims was exactly lovable. But I think it goes beyond that, Stan. I see a general attitude of relief around that place. Relief instead of worry. And we're talking 2 separate incidents of first-degree murder. Maybe 3 if you count that set designer." "That was an accident," said Branco. "Maybe not. We were on a straight and level stretch of road, so I opened up the engine and made it roar just the way the cop might have done with his Alpha." I glanced his way. He looked content. "What I'm saying," said the cop, "is that the blasé attitude these people have is going to make it a lot harder to crack this case because no one really cares who killed any of the victims. Except maybe their insurance companies." Branco looked me straight in the eyes. "And me," he said. I returned his look and said, "Then me too." "Good," he said. "Now get your eyes back on the road." Always the cop. We headed back to the Opera House. When I dropped Branco off, his parting words were, "You handled the car okay. Next time, I'll show you that power shift technique." "It's a date," I blurted. Branco scowled and closed the door. I watched him walk away from the car, and I admired his long, deliberate stride and the way he carried himself proudly. Then I drove back to Daphne's place. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.